If you are watching this video after a betrayal by a narcissist, I can almost guess the sentence running through your mind. Maybe I am the only fool, the only one carrying all of this. It feels as if every burden, the pain, the confusion, the loss has collapsed entirely onto your shoulders. And I won't deny that. The pain you are feeling is real, profoundly real. It cuts deep, precisely because it came from someone you once trusted, someone you believed shared a genuine, warm, me and them, on the same side, kind of connection with you. But there is another truth, quieter, almost invisible, that most people in your position overlook, that betrayal is not only a wound in your life, it is also a fracture within them. Every time they choose deception, choose control, choose to step on someone's trust to preserve their fragile ego, they are also turning their back on the only part of themselves capable of real connection. When they prioritize manipulation over honesty, control over vulnerability, they shut the door to the very things that give life meaning, mutuality, trust, emotional depth. On the surface, they may look like the victor, getting what they want, holding the upper hand, creating chaos, and then standing aside to watch it burn. But beneath that posture of arrogance lies a fractured self, an internal misalignment that slowly eats away at them. Contrary to what they project, they are neither steady nor emotionally sovereign. Their grandiosity is simply a costume draped over a fragile, hollow core. And each time they betray someone who believed in that fabricated version of them, they are not only destroying the relationship, they are also tearing off their own mask, exposing the lie their entire identity depends on. In this video, I want to help you look at that betrayal from another angle, not to minimize your pain, but to help you see that you are not the only one who lost something, and in that realization, you can begin to step forward instead of standing frozen in the belief that you are the one who lost the most. And from that moment, the moment you step out of their orbit, stop feeding the admiration that held their mask in place, another truth emerges. The price they must pay always arrives late, but no one escapes it. Because when the person who once believed in them most finally leaves with eyes that see clearly, it hits the only place in them still capable of fear. If this person, the one who knew me best, no longer believes, then what exactly have I been performing all this time? The answer is quiet but brutal. Emptiness. That is the first fracture in the ego they've tried so hard to inflate. Not an explosion, but a slow internal sagging, the kind that makes a person start hearing echoes inside themselves. For the narcissist, betrayal is a momentary win, a quick ego spike, a fleeting sense of, I am in control. But what they don't understand is that every act of betrayal leaves a crack in their already unstable inner narrative. Because right after that small victory comes the psychological fallout they continually avoid, the connections they destroyed, the questions they cannot answer, and the growing sense that they are drifting further from anything real. They win a moment but lose the entire arc of the story. They preserve the illusion but sacrifice the only thing that could ease their loneliness, the capacity for genuine connection. And then time begins to work, because no matter how hard they deny it, the human psyche cannot survive in contradiction forever. Not even theirs. We, including them, are built for meaning, but their life runs on a story with no foundation, held together by excuses, distortion, and avoidance. And when their actions no longer align with the image they tell themselves, the fracture becomes a pull, an internal weight, not loud, silent, a kind of grief one cannot name, but always feels in the quiet. That is the real cost. And this is the second layer so many people fail to see. Their real pain does not begin when you leave. It begins when they can no longer believe in their own illusion. Because beneath all the defenses, the theatrics, and the spiked ego, what destabilizes them the most is not your absence, but the fact that the story they built their identity on suddenly stops being believable. For as long as they can remember, they have relied on one central belief, that they can manipulate, deceive, and discard without consequence, that they are untouchable. Chime with dolten, conten, conten, conten. But the moment you see them clearly, and even more, choose to walk away, you dismantle the foundational lie of their psychological architecture, the illusion of omnipotence. And an illusion, once seen through, can never be fully repaired. The fracture you create is not loud, but it is deep. It makes the mask they have worn their entire life begin to peel at the seams, exposing the part of them they themselves cannot bear to confront. But betrayal, at its core, is not simply breaking a promise. It is turning away from the highest part of oneself, the part that could have chosen integrity, could have chosen honesty, could have built something meaningful, but didn't. When the narcissist betrays you, they simultaneously betray the better version of themselves they refuse to grow into. And that is the wound they have no language for. Meanwhile, you, the one who was hurt, begin to heal, to understand, to rebuild a life that becomes more coherent and meaningful. They, in contrast, remain frozen, unable to move forward, unable to move back. Stuck in repetition, seeking new admiration, replaying old strategies, trying to prop up a narrative of superiority that no longer holds. They cannot find peace, because peace requires a foundation they do not possess: truth. And if there is one thing a narcissist cannot face, it is the truth about themselves. And from the very moment that illusion cracks, another process begins, silent, chaotic, and irreversible. What few people see, and what the narcissist will never willingly reveal, is that right after the betrayal, what floods their inner world is not triumph, not satisfaction, but panic, not the loud, explosive kind, but a muted internal chaos, where they are forced to race against the very truth that has just surfaced. Because truth, to them, is a threat, not a light. The moment the mask fractures, they stand at a crossroads they have spent their entire life avoiding. Either look directly at their own actions, or destroy the entire sequence of events to preserve the image they have constructed. And because the narcissistic ego cannot survive on the foundation of truth, they choose the only path they know: rewrite everything. They must rewrite the story so quickly that even they cannot keep track of the version they are telling. They must distort reality so aggressively that a part of them grows exhausted from remembering which lie was told to whom. In the new version, they are no longer the one who caused harm. They are the one harmed. They are no longer the betrayer. They are the victim who had no choice. And you become the unstable one, the demanding one, the person who left them no way out. As long as roles are reversed, they never have to face the most terrifying question of all: if I am the one who hurts others, then who am I really? But all self-deception has a boundary. The more they rewrite the story, the further they drift from their own emotional reality. The more desperately they insist they are right, the more they feel a faint inner vibration, a kind of psychological misalignment that destabilizes them. They do not have language for it, so they call it irritation, or boredom, or fatigue. But in truth, it is the collapse of the false self, the one they pretend not to hear. And slowly, it begins to show up as restless days with no apparent cause, sleepless nights without a reason for, bursts of anger over trivial things, and an emptiness drifting through the chest like a cold draft. None of this is destiny, nor is it just how they are. It is the price of denying truth in order to protect an ego that was hollow to begin with. It is a race they will never win. But here is the irony. The more a narcissist tries to run from the truth, the tighter they wrap themselves in the trap they built. Outsiders may see them accusing others of being fake or dishonest, but no one sees the inner theater they inhabit, a stage where every conversation, every memory, every fragment of emotion must be edited to fit one single script. I'm right, I'm superior, I have a reason. That script only truly begins to crumble when they meet someone who does the one thing they never anticipate: stop playing their game, stop reacting, stop explaining, stop feeding the story they're trying to write, and then walk away. That silence is so loud it becomes a kind of explosion in their mind, because when there is no one left to manipulate, they are forced to face themselves, and that is the one thing they fear most. Instead of looking at the fracture, they do what they always do: seal it with a bigger lie. They begin rewriting you for others to hear. You are unstable. You are dangerous. You are the reason they had no choice. They seek allies, new supply, anyone willing to hear a revised version of the story, one where the betrayer magically becomes the noble victim. But none of this says anything about you. It only reveals the survival instinct of the lie itself. If truth slips through even a hairline crack, the entire house of cards collapses instantly. And here lies the deeper tragedy. The lie doesn't just protect them, it imprisons them. The more tightly they cling to a distorted reality, the further they drift from anything real. Their relationships become paper thin. Their self-awareness shrinks, withers, starves. Emotional depth, the part of us that makes love and connection possible, slips completely out of reach. Meanwhile, you, even after months or years of pain, slowly move toward healing and truth, while they move in the opposite direction. Every step you take toward clarity is a step they sink deeper into their own fabricated world. Every moment you exhale in relief, they feel a larger emptiness opening inside them. Their pain is not the dramatic collapse that anyone can see. It's background noise, the persistent hum of a hollow self that can only function through constant distraction. A new story, a new person, a new illusion to cover the same old fear. And that is the prison they lock themselves in. The bitter truth is that narcissists genuinely believe they can cut off a person the way you cut an unnecessary thread cleanly, decisively, without consequence. They assume that once they walk away, or once you do, their life will continue effortlessly, because in their mind, you were merely a prop in their story. But they forget one thing: relationships are not transactions, and human beings do not vanish like objects. Every connection is an energetic field, carrying meaning, memory, reflection, and emotional exchange. Even if they try to live on the surface, pretending nothing happened, their inner structure absorbs the impact. Because what they call a self is merely a fragile construction, paper-thin, dependent on others to stay intact. They don't have a true identity built from honesty and responsibility. They have a dependent ego, one that requires someone to praise, submit, or react in order to feel real. It's duonide. This is why, when they betray someone who loved them, challenged them, or reflected truths they didn't want to see, they unknowingly sever a crucial supply line, their mirror. You were once that mirror. When they wanted admiration, you reflected their greatness. When they wanted to avoid truth, you reflected what they hated. When they needed power, you became the object of their manipulation. But once the mirror disappears when you go silent, vanish, and never return, they lose the reflection that sustained their illusion. At first, they mistake this for freedom. They convince themselves that losing you means relief. But very quickly, an existential void begins to open. Because narcissists don't engage with others for companionship or connection, they engage for control and identity reinforcement. When there is no one left to react, no one to pull emotional energy from, they must face what they've been running from their entire lives, themselves. And then the old voice resurfaces, the one they bury under noise, drama, and performance. You're not enough. You're not loved. You're a fraud. Without your emotional energy to muffle those whispers, they begin to leak through the cracks of their false self, not as dramatic breakdowns, but as subtle symptoms: restlessness, insomnia, agitation, emotional numbness. And that is when they perform the hardest. New partner, new persona, new highlights, a life that seems better than ever. But the more they perform, the more clearly the void reveals itself, at least to their own nervous system. And from that empty space, a different kind of erosion begins when a narcissist's life becomes nothing more than a stage built to cover the void. What most people never see is this: beneath the performance of confidence, power, and superiority lies a hollow space where meaning is supposed to live. Betrayal doesn't fill that hollow, it deepens it. Relationships aren't transactions. They are vessels of meaning. Through others, We understand who we are, what matters, and how to walk through a chaotic world. Healthy people, even through conflict and pain, slowly form a shared narrative, a place where truth and growth are cultivated. For the narcissist, that narrative is never mutual. It is a monologue. Others are props in the script they write for themselves. The noble victim, the misunderstood hero, the exceptional mind the world fails to appreciate. But the moment they betray someone who loved them through chaos, they create a crack in that very script. A small crack, yet wide enough for truth to seep in. The grand house of cards they built begins to tremble at a gentle breeze called reality. In great N, because when they removed you, they believed they were protecting their ego. In reality, they removed one of the few stabilizing forces keeping their distorted inner world from collapsing. Your belief, your presence, your attempts to connect, these were the invisible beams propping up their illusion. When you disappear, those beams vanish. What remains is not strength, it is fragmentation. And this fragmentation isn't explosive. It decays slowly, quietly, like wood hollowed out by termites. The more they avoid the void, the more the void expands. The more they run from truth, the more they slip into moral and emotional erosion, losing depth, losing self-connection, losing internal coherence. Avoiding truth never creates peace. It only creates a meaningless life decorated with illusions. And from that internal erosion, we step into an even darker truth. The narcissist's past never truly lets them go, and it traps them in the tragedy of being unable to atone. The cruelest thing a narcissist must face doesn't lie in what they do today, but in what they can't bury from yesterday. Their past does not return in the form of remorse or growth the way it does for a normal, integrated person. It returns as tiny fractures, quiet but persistent in the illusion they must patch every day just to keep themselves from collapsing. They do not live in the present. They live inside a psychological theater, continuously edited to protect the only three conclusions their ego can tolerate. I am right. I am innocent. I am the victim. Yet every time they betray someone genuine, they create another paradox that no script can hide. Even if they erase your name from the story, diminish you, or recast you as the villain, the truth of that relationship still exists like a shadow, lingering behind the backdrop. You disappear, but the imprint of you does not disappear from them. And because they can never sit still inside their own history, they run from memory, from responsibility, from anything that exposes the truth. But running does not bring freedom, it brings fragmentation. They must twist the story, twist their memories, twist the people around them just to avoid facing themselves. The more they twist, the deeper they sink, like falling into psychological quicksand. The more they struggle, the faster they drown. Meanwhile, the person they betrayed you moves through pain by confronting it, and grief, unlike illusion, can heal. It can expand awareness. It can carry you into a new chapter of your life. The peace you eventually build becomes a mirror, reflecting what they never dare admit. They lost the chance to become a better version of themselves. But the deepest tragedy is here. They cannot walk the path of redemption. Redemption requires looking directly at oneself, feeling guilt, accepting that you caused harm. It requires standing in the shoes of the person you hurt and staying there long enough to understand. For the narcissistic structure, those things aren't just difficult, they feel like a psychological death. The death of the mask they've lived behind. The death of the false self they built as their foundation. So they would rather rule inside their imaginary world than step down and touch the truth. And because of that, they remain stuck, loud on the outside, but unmoving on the inside. A life with no growth, no atonement, no transformation, only repetition and a hollowness that deepens with time. And from that very inner erosion, we reach the final truth. A narcissist never escapes the price they create. On the surface, they may look like they've moved on. New people, new stories, new performances. But beneath that surface, where no mask can hold their pain, doesn't explode. It stagnates. It loops. It calcifies into psychological stillness. When someone refuses to learn from the harm they cause, they don't stay the same, they regress. The ego shrinks, becomes brittle, defensive, and increasingly hollow. That is their tragedy, not just losing you, but losing any chance of becoming a better version of themselves. You, on the other hand, stand somewhere entirely different. You can hurt, but you can grow. You can grieve, but you can rebuild. Your pain, when faced honestly, becomes the foundation for a depth of coherence they will never reach. And remember this, their silence does not mean they aren't paying a price. They're paying it internally in ways you cannot see. Their punishment is the emptiness inside them, the lifelong entrapment within a mask they're too afraid to remove. Your justice is not their downfall. Your justice is your ability to walk forward and create a life rooted in truth while they remain stuck in the world they made. And that is the only thing worth carrying as you leave this story behind.